come up. So kids of all ages, you're welcome to come up and come forward. It's good to see you guys today. Now is also the time where we receive our offering. So if you're in that back row, if you could get the offering basket going, that would be fantastic. How you doing? Good morning. Happy New Year. How's everybody doing? Good, good. Isn't it crazy how there's no snow outside? I was driving in today and it was so gloomy, but I'm hoping we get some snow. It's sort of a strange winter. But it's good to see you guys. I'm glad you're here. Now today we're talking about a group of people that maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't. They're known as spies. Do you guys know what a spy is? What's a spy? What's a spy? Very good. So they want to figure something about you. And so what might they do? What do they walk around and say, "Hi, I'm a spy"? What do they do? Oh, maybe they dress in black, true. But that's right, they hide. And so spies, they don't wear a normal military uniform. They try to wear the clothes of the area that they're in so that they could blend in and do research and learn about their enemy. Well, in today's passage, we're talking about two spies who were sent into the city of Jericho. And again, they were members of the army of the Lord that we talked about last week. But they didn't have a uniform on at that time because they wanted to blend in with their surroundings. So I want you to start thinking about what it's like to wear a uniform in an army. So can we look at some slides there, Kevin? Let's look at the first one. Now this is from the American Revolution. The group on the right in the blue uniform, those are the good guys. Those are the patriots. And the guys on the left, those are the enemy, the British redcoats that represented tyranny and taxation and all that other stuff. So you could tell from their uniforms which is the good guys, which is the bad guys. Look at some more uniform. Now this is where it gets kind of complicated because war is an awful thing. And then in the American Civil War, sometimes we have the North that wore the blue uniforms. We have the South that wore the gray uniforms. And sometimes brother was fighting against brother. And so it was hard for them to figure out who the enemy really was because a lot of times you were fighting family members. Thank you. Next slide. Now this is a little bit later. Here we have World War I. And on the right we have the American soldiers that were called doughboys. And there they have this really unique helmet. And those are the good guys. And on the left we have the evil enemy in the German Empire. Those are the bad guys and the enemy. Let's look at the next one. A few years later, World War II took place. And on the right we have the soldiers that wore the uniform of the United States Army. And then we have the left. The enemy again of the Nazis. Let's look at some more. Here we have the Vietnam War, where again, on the right you have a uniform of the good guys, and on the left you have the Viet Cong, and their uniform showed that they were the enemy. Next one, modern day, we have the War on Terror. We have the soldiers that are risking their lives right now for us, wearing their uniforms, the good guys. Then you have the terrorists that won't show their face because they try to blend in. Now here's what we're going to talk about. Can we see that last slide? Who do you think is the good guy, and who do you think is the enemy? What do you think? Who do you think is the enemy? You think the enemy's on the right? How many of you kids think the enemy's on the right? Now, why do you think that? That's very, very interesting. Why do you think that, Ava? Why does he look like the enemy? He looks bad. Well, this is really a good illustration because in today's Bible passage, Joshua sends the spies, and so that's Joshua wearing his uniform and his military army. And here we have Rahab, who actually lived in Jericho, and she was the enemy. But here's the thing. We're going to find out that even someone like Rahab, who lived in the enemy city and whose heart was turned against the Lord, in one instant, she becomes from an enemy to a soldier in the army of the Lord. So she becomes one of the good guys. But you couldn't tell that by looking at her. You couldn't see that by the way that she was dressed because she didn't have a uniform on. So we're going to talk about these spies today who go in and they risk their life to find out information. And guess who came to save them? Rahab. Can we see how she saved them? Not only did she hide them from the king's soldiers up on a roof, but then she helped them escape by leading them with the rope out of her window. And they survived because Rahab, who remember was once an enemy, but now turned into one of the good guys. Because God looks at our heart, not our uniform, not the way that we look, but He looks at our heart. And we're going to see how Rahab's heart turn from being an enemy of God to being one of the good guys. So thanks for listening and participating. You did a great job. Here we have some candy. I'm going to stick this one over here. Remy, can we put that one right there? Grab a piece of candy, kids, and return to your seats. Everyone else, if you could please open up your Bibles to the Old Testament book of Joshua chapter 2. If you guys are ages 4, 5, and 6, you're going to go with Mr. DeLille to Rest Stop. So with your parents' permission, you're going to go see Mr. DeLille. Yes, you can. Thanks for asking. She's excited to go to Rest Stop. As I tried to mention with the kids, we continue our study on the book of Joshua, where today, just before the army of the Lord is sent out to do battle against the Canaanites, the enemy of God's people, Joshua, being a good military leader, knows full well that the only way to succeed in the military conquest was to know their enemy. And if you know the story of Joshua, thank you. If you know the story of Joshua, then you know that 40 years before these events, he and 11 other spies originally went over into the Jordan, across that river, and went into Canaan. And out of all 12, only 2, Joshua and another gentleman, believed that God would allow them to be victorious. The other 10 spies, they saw giants and they saw fortified cities, and they came back and they told Moses, there's no way God is going to give us victory. And so, again, you know the story. 40 years they wandered. Now it's time. Now God gives Joshua the commissioning. You're going to go across the Jordan. You're going to get this land that I'm in the process of giving you. And so all of the people of Israel are getting things ready. They're putting on their armor. They're gathering supplies for the invasion. And Joshua, again, wanting to know his enemy, sends 2 spies across the Jordan River to seek out what it is they're going to encounter. And Joshua specifically says to the spies, make sure you look at the city of Jericho. Can we see the slide of Jericho? Now, this is one artist rendering looking at biblical text, but also looking at archaeology. Throughout all of the promised land of Canaan, there were these city-states. They were fortified cities that had their own king, they had their own God that they worshiped, and they had their own standing army. And so Joshua and the God's people were going to have to go from city-state to city-state. The very first one they were going to come in contact with was Jericho. And you could see that it was a thriving city, probably something like 2,500 inhabitants. They had a huge wall, a single gate, but then they had these towers that you could see for miles to know when people were coming. And so what we see in today's passage is that these spies were sent specifically to the city of Jericho because they understood something. They understood that in order to conquer that land, they first had to deal with Jericho. Now, something I forgot to say to the kids, Kevin, if we could go back. One of the things that I forgot to mention to the kids, of all the people that we talked about in December who were the heroes of the faith, Rahab, who we're going to talk about today, was actually one of those people who was a hero of the faith. Why? Look at what she did. By an act of faith, Rahab from Jericho welcomed the spies and escaped the destruction that came to those who refused God, because that city of Jericho was about to be destroyed. And as we see in today's passages, of all the people, of all the houses that these spies went to find safety, they went to one of the most unlikely people in the person of Rahab. And so keep that in mind as we look at this, because again, Rahab, not only was she an ethnic enemy of God, but as we're going to see, she was a moral enemy of God because of her lifestyle and her profession. And yet we see this amazing transformation take place in God's Word today, where this once enemy of God becomes a soldier in the Lord's army. So let's take a look at it. Chapter 2. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim, and saying, go, look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went. Then they entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out this land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, saying to the guards, yes, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." But of course she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she had laid on her roof. So the king's men, sent out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. As soon as the pursuers had gone, the gate was shut. And you can imagine, ka-choom! Before the spies lay down for the night, Rahab went up to the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord had dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. And we've heard what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below." So she pleads with them, "Now, please, swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and my mother, my brothers and my sisters, and all who belong to them, that you will save us from death." The spies replied, "Our lives for your lives. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us this land." So she let them down a rope through the window, for her house that she lived in was part of the city wall. Now she said to them, "Now go to the hills so that the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourself there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." The men said to her, "Hey, the oath that you made us swear will not be binding on us, unless when we enter this land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless you've brought your family and your mother and your brothers and all your family into your house. If anyone goes outside of your house and onto the street, his blood will be on his own head. We will not be responsible. As for anyone who is in this house with you, his blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on him. But if you tell what we're doing here, we will be released from the oath that you made us swear." Rahab says, "I agree. Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they departed. She tied the scarlet cord in the window, as they instructed. When they left, they went down into the hills and stayed there 3 days, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 spies started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun. And they told him everything that happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given this whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." And so last week we saw how God commanded Joshua and his people to go across the Jordan and give this land that he was in the process of giving them. But remember how often God said to Joshua, "Be strong and be courageous." So you can imagine how busy the Israelite camps were. They were putting on their armor and they're getting supplies, and they had 3 days. 3 days, and then they were going to cross the Jordan River. Joshua was really a brilliant statistician, and he knew the military mind of saying, you know what, we need to spy out the country, specifically that huge city of Jericho. So he knew what it meant to send out 2 spies, because remember, he had done it several years beforehand. Not only would these spies be behind enemy lines, they were instructed to intermingle with the populace and to understand what sort of city Jericho was. Now, as I tried to mention with the kids, I don't think they had their big uniforms on, and I don't think they had a sword and a shield, and they came walking into Jericho, "Hey, we're here to spy out your land. How many soldiers?" "Okay, good." No, they were spies, and so you can imagine they tried to blend in. They tried to be incognito, and they walked throughout the city. Now, the author of this book doesn't give any information as to how many soldiers, how thick the walls were, how many gates there were. All we see is that they went into this land and they spied it out. Sooner or later, we're not sure how soon it was, the city kind of said, "Who are these guys? What? Those are Israelites. Hey, they're here to spy out the land." So they didn't do a very good job spying. So if this was a class and you were taking an exam on being spies, they would not have gotten a very good grade because they were outed. And so much so that they probably sensed, oh man, we're going to get caught. So of all the places, of all the people to go and find shelter, they went to this person, Rahab, who, remember, not only is an ethnic enemy of God, but we could see from her profession, morally an enemy of God. We don't know exactly why they chose her and her house, but what we know in God's providence, He knew that Rahab's heart was open to change. And so they knew that they were going to get caught. So they went hiding and they found Rahab, and she gets in there, and all of a sudden the king finds out. Not only are there Israelite spies in Jericho, but they went to Rahab's house. So what does he do? He sends his guards. And the guards are given an order. Tell Rahab that they need to let go of the men that went there to hide, because they're the Israelites and they're here to spy out the whole land, and she needs to give them up now. Now this order that Rahab was given by the king's guards, of course originating from the king, has a penalty of death if she does not comply. But if you look again at the text, she does an amazing thing. She does this fantastic thing. She says to the guards, yeah, there were some guys here, but I didn't know where they were from. When the sun was going down and the gates were about to close, they already got out of here. And if you hurry, you could go catch them. So quick. What did she do here? Under penalty of death, Rahab commits treason against her fellow people of Jericho and against the king himself. So we have to ask the question, was Rahab wrong for lying to the soldiers? Doesn't God's word say, thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor? I would argue in this case, even though Rahab was an enemy of God, even though her heart was corrupted and sinful like all of ours, she knew that there was an order given from the king that was superseded by a much higher authority. That Rahab knew that the right thing to do in this case was to protect these Israelites because of who they represented. And so we think about that. We think back to those soldiers in World War II. We think back to the families in Europe, like in the Netherlands, that when the Nazis gave orders to capture the Jewish people, many Christians lied when those soldiers came to their door saying, we hear that you are harboring Jews and you need to turn them up. What did they do? They lied. Did they do anything? No. They did the courageous thing because they protected life. Rahab knew that these spies were sent by the living God. And so after these guards go on this wild goose chase, Rahab climbs up on the roof to explain to these two spies why she did what she did. And I want to walk you through this. So if you still have your Bibles open, this is important. Because remember, Rahab is an enemy of the Lord. She's a prostitute. And look at the words that come out of her mouth. She says with confidence, I know that the Lord, and here she uses the sacred Hebrew name of Yahweh. I know that Yahweh has given this land to you. Notice she didn't say, someday God's going to give you this land. No, God has already in the past given you. He's in the process of giving you this land. And because of that, great fear has fallen on us, and all who live in this country are melting with fear. Have you ever heard that expression, scared to death? That's what this represents. That they were feeling faint because of what they heard about this Yahweh and about these Israelite armies. We heard how you did these amazing things. And when we heard it, verse 11, not only did our hearts melt, but everyone's courage failed. Remember, God had told Joshua to be strong and courageous. And now as they're about to cross the Jordan, all of these city-states. Now again, these are not wimps. These are trained soldiers, giants living in fortified cities. And just the sound of God's name and the stories of what God's people had done causes them to faint and literally takes their breath away. And they are scared to death. Because your God is the God of heaven above and the earth below. All of the pagan cities in Canaan had their own god that they worshiped. Rahab grew up worshiping one of these gods. If you go to anywhere in the world, whether it's an Amazon tribe in South America or a Buddhist temple on the other side of the world, everybody worships some sort of god. Here Rahab knows that there is a God named Yahweh, and He has already given this land, and He is the God above all other gods. Think of the profession of faith that is. To go from being an ethnic enemy of God, a moral enemy of God, and in one breath her heart has changed, and now she's professing faith in the true God, becoming, like us, soldiers in the Lord's army. But she has a deal to make with the spies. Now please, swear to me by the Lord that you would show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me this sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, my mother, my brothers, her whole household. What is she asking? She knows that like the other cities that have already been destroyed, Jericho will come down, and Jericho will be destroyed, and the inhabitants will suffer the wrath of God. And so she's asking, can you please protect me in the shelter of God's presence? She begs with them. And of course, the spies oblige and say, our lives for yours. So what did she do? Now again, Jericho was this walled city. And all over the walls, they actually had people living in houses above the walls. And so Rahab's particular house was also on the wall. And there was a little window. It's probably a 15, 20-foot drop, maybe higher. You can imagine the spies feel trapped. The gates are shut. How are they supposed to get out? Rahab has already committed treason. She's already sent the guards on a wild goose chase, and now she lets this rope out the window so that these spies could safely escape. So she commits treason, and now she's helping them escape. And as they're hanging out the window, can we see that picture again? As they're hanging out the window with that rope, go down, up. Sorry, Kevin, I threw you a curveball there. As they're hanging out, they say, now wait a minute here. Before we go, we need to clarify something. This oath that you made us take, we're going to honor it unless all of your family are out wandering the streets. If they're all in your home and you put that red cord hanging from your window, they will all be saved. They will all be spared from the constant or the certain destruction that's looming. So not only does Rahab commit treason, not only does she help them escape, but do you also know that she gives them some tips to escape the other guards that are wandering around? Say, hey guys, this is what you need to do. Go down the hills, verse 16. The pursuers won't find you there. Hide yourself there for 3 days until they return, then go your way. So she commits treason by lying to the guards. She hides them. She lets them go. And now she actually gives them tips to escape. And so they leave and she hangs that red cord out the window. So then they walk back and follow her agreement. Now imagine if you're Joshua. You were one of those spies 40 years ago. You know what it feels like to be behind enemy lines and surrounded by the enemy. Probably like someone who's, fathers, back in the 50s, they didn't let fathers go into the birthing room for their children. And you know that they're all out in the, I hope everything's okay. So you can imagine Joshua is probably in his tent and he's pacing. Because he was a spy, remember? He's thinking, oh, did they make it? They were surrounded by the enemy. What happened? It's been a few days. Is God really going to give us this land? I don't know what to do. I'm feeling kind of afraid. And in walks the two spies, unharmed. And what do? The end of the passage here. They said to Joshua everything that had happened to them in the city. And then look at their profession of faith. Remember what happened 40 years ago with the 12 spies? 10 of them said, no way we're going to be able to take this land. People are too big. They're too powerful. There's these walled cities. Forget about it. But look at these two spies. Verse 24, they said to Joshua, the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All of the people are melting in fear. They're all scared to death because of us. Now, the spies are not saying that all of people are melting in fear because the Israelites are a powerful army and Joshua is such a great military leader. Remember, that's not the point of this book. The point of this book is to see that the people of Canaan were terrified because of who stood behind Joshua. Because who sent Joshua. The Lord was going to fight on their behalf, and because of that, they were terrified. But when we think of Rahab, and we think of such an unlikely person who, remember, came from being an enemy of the Lord to being a soldier in the Lord's army, she is remembered not only as a hero of the faith, but if you were here on Christmas Eve, we talked about the genealogy a bit of Jesus. Can we see that Matthew passage? what do you know? In the genealogy of the Savior of the world, we see Solomon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Now, normally women weren't mentioned in these genealogies, but yet Rahab was so important to God's redemptive plan. Sure enough, there she is. Rahab, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed, the father of Jesse. And who is Jesse? Well, Jesse was the father of King David himself. And so Ruth was what? It was the great-great-grandmother of King David, and the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Jesus Christ, Savior of the world. That's how important someone who on the outside looked to be an enemy of God. But through her profession of faith, she became one of the Lord's army. But it doesn't end there. Can we see the next slide? Remember, our theme for this month was back or later in Joshua 24:15. He's going to declare to God's people after all these wars have been fought, and they're not done yet, but almost with a weary voice, he says, you guys do what you're going to do, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, this took place in Joshua 24. We're only in Joshua chapter 2. So this is perhaps years from now. And yet Joshua, before he ever uttered these words, before the Holy Spirit inspired him to make these statements, we see the most unlikely person of all in Rahab actually live out that verse. She knew that the rest of the city, they're going to go about, but as for me and my house, she declared we were going to serve the Lord. And for that, she's mentioned in one other place in the New Testament, in the book of James, talking about how we demonstrate our gratitude for God for saving us by obeying His word. What does it say? In the same way, was not even Rahab, a prostitute, considered righteous for what she did by giving lodging to those spies and then sent them off in a different direction? And why is this important? James is not arguing about salvation by faith versus works. Rather, James is arguing for a demonstration of a true saving faith versus a false non-saving faith. Rahab demonstrated her faith. It wasn't just by words. She demonstrated her faith in God, demonstrating her commissioning into the Lord's army, both by her words and by her actions. And as a result, her profession of faith and her actions, Rahab and her entire family would soon be saved by certain destruction. And so when we think about that, and we think about why this passage is important to us, something that I wrestled with the entire week is I was working through this passage and saying, Lord, what do you want me to say about Rahab? She's this person, and she's a pagan, and she worships a false god, and look at her lifestyle. And I started to judge her. Maybe some of you did as well. But as soon as we start to do that, we forget the fact that you and I all deserve the wrath of God. Apart from the grace that God gives us, we too are enemies of God. But in that breath, in that moment, our hearts could be changed from being an enemy of God to now being a soldier in the Lord's army, saved by grace for what Christ did on the cross. Because the wrath that's about to be poured out on Jericho, we deserve that same wrath. And by the grace of God, that wrath was poured on Christ as He hung from that cross. But we too, there are times where we have to make a profession of faith, much like Rahab did. And so if you were here last week, we mentioned in March, I think we decided on Palm Sunday. What's the date? The 24th. On March 24th, Palm Sunday, we're going to be filling up the pool again. And so we're going to be offering people baptism. So if you would like to be baptized, if you've never done that, and you've made a commitment to the Lord and you would like to do that, here's a sign-up sheet for that. But perhaps you were baptized in the past, and now you've realized that you've taken ownership of your faith, and you, like Rahab, want to stand before this congregation and profess that faith. We're also going to have professions of faith on that Sunday as well. Because like Rahab, apart from what God did for us, we too are enemies of God. But by the grace that Christ gives us and accepting Him as our Savior, we now could call God Father. And we too are in the Lord's army. Please pray with me now. Heavenly Father, I thank You for Rahab. Such an unlikely person she was. She did some amazing things to warrant being mentioned 3 times in the New Testament. Lord, not only was she a hero of the faith, she demonstrated what it looks like to live out that verse that says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Help us to do that each and every day of our lives, Lord, as we now, by what Christ did for us, can call You Father. In Jesus' name, amen.